Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really want
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'd ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
We feel that about 50% of women who are infertile or subfertile, endometriosis is the underlying factor. So it used to play a role.
Half of the women who present with infertility problems will turn out to have
an underlying endometriosis as a cofactor affecting their fertility.
WESN.
Whatever can go wrong will go wrong. That would be, well, I said that I was coming in the office this morning because I just couldn't get the door open. And in governance, you have to be prepared to deal with things like that. A business needs to be prepared to deal with things like that. Something will just go wrong. You know, maybe a key employee gets sick or has a sick relative, sick child. Some act of God happens. COVID, there were certain businesses that opened or expanded, maybe expanded their size or expanded into new ventures just before COVID. I think with regards to car dealerships and clothing stores and restaurants, and not all of them survived, right? You have to be able to account for the unexpected. Now, the thing with the unexpected is it's not always coming out of left field per se, because the situation with the maxi taxi drivers, depending on who you are, it might feel like it's coming out of left field. That is to say, it's a complete surprise, it's an ambush. Depending on who you are, you might think that way. The problem is some of the symptoms we're accustomed to living with. We're accustomed to living with the madness. We're accustomed, the roads are bad, it is what it is. Trinidad is not a real place, move on. We're accustomed to the speed limit not always making sense. There's a part of the highway coming from Chaguanas, coming right by Grand Bazaar, I believe it is. Basically, it's part of the flyover, part of the road system on the intersection. And, you know, you're basically going at 100, and then potentially, well before the signs even says it, it just drops to 60. Does it make sense that it drops to 60? Maybe. I don't think there's enough signage to warn vehicles, hey, you're kind of not going to be on the highway anymore. And it's just one of those things where it's like, it's Trinidad. We don't always do everything the best way. The thing is, some of these things a government could have potentially anticipated. We might not see all the signs and have all the pieces to add up together, but a government might have. At the very least, the various separate parts of government maybe should have had a clue. One of the things that came out of the meeting with the Minister of Transport is, and this I find is very interesting. First of all, apparently Red Band Maxi's Route 2, they're going to continue the strike action today. Other routes are expected, but not Route 2 and 3. One of the things that came from the Route 2 Maxi Taxi Association president this is his quote: "The meeting had a lot of undertones of politics." And that's not a good thing for a meeting like this. When you're at this stage, politics should never be any part of the ingredients in a meeting like this. We didn't come with politics. It had a heavy, heavy presence of politics, which is a little unfortunate. But we understand that the minister and most ministers are creatures of politics. But in this junction here, where there is a serious situation in terms of transportation and public interest, politics must not be the main ingredient or such a heavy presence. Now, the head of the Route 2 Association, Brenton Knights, he is reported to have stressed that there were many disparities between what the ministry believes is taking place and what is actually happening on the ground. Now, what does he necessarily mean by politics? Well, another report basically called out the minister when the minister would basically, because they're meeting with one minister. But if you read the concerns that the maxi taxi drivers had that was reported in the news yesterday, you might realize that not all of the concerns have to do with the Ministry of Transport. So now the question is, what is the strategy behind sending this one minister forward? Because the association representative or association representatives expressed frustration that several concerns were described as falling outside the minister's remit, particularly matters relating to infrastructure. They argued, this is the association representatives, that ministries should work collectively through cabinet to address long-standing concerns affecting the sector. Much of the meeting focused on updating them about work being undertaken by the ministry rather than providing solutions to the issues that led to the protest action. Quote, the theme of the meeting was really to bring us so-called up-to-date about information in the ministry or the work the ministry has done. And this might be where the Route 2 Association president is saying, what's with all of this politicking? It is not consistent to what we know of the work that is required to bring us where we at. And based on our understanding of what is required for we not to be in the position that we are today, there are vast contrasts, difference in terms of what we are expecting or what we should be doing at this point in time to what they presented. There's a vast difference in the information, and based on what we know, that is expected to be done so that we would never have to be in this position. But then now this report says that Mr. Knights criticized what he described as political undertones. So we have a situation where is the politics, well, the individual ministries are, as much as they're supposed to be operating in clusters, and one would hope foster better inter-ministerial cooperation, even if you are technically not in a cluster. It seems as though this one minister has been sent out there. Wait, we have concerns about the speed limit laws. We have concerns about the unlicensed taxis. We have concerns about the road infrastructure. We have concerns about crime. Now, if you can't speak to all of these concerns, why are you the only one at the meeting? Is that the politics? Is the politics one minister maybe passing the buck on another minister? Is the politics cabinet saying, you go deal with it? Technically, that's more to do about you than me, even though they know it's going to need a more comprehensive response than just one loan ministry that is limited in what it could promise and what it could offer solutions to. Or was the politics basically saying, oh, yes, PNM, and you're only doing this because it's PNM? Here's the catch-22, I think, that if this is the case, UNC analysts, operators, and politicians seemingly don't seem to understand. There is a side effect of is we time now. On some level, you're going to get it we time now. You just are, right? The question is, how far is it going to go? How extreme are you going to implement it? How blatant are you going to be? Because one could make an argument that UNC areas maybe didn't get as much as PNM areas when the PNM was in power. Now, I will say this with regards to local government allocations, and only local government allocations. From what I understand, the difference between a PNM local government corporation and a UNC local government corporation is one couldn't speak and the other one could speak. They had similar complaints with regards to budget, right? Now, outside of that, let's just assume that UNC areas are getting more attention now under the UNC. Fine. The problem is, it doesn't matter if the people are diehard PNM supporters or not. At the very least, if you can't meet the minimums with regards to their concerns, well, they will be mad at you. I'm not saying if you pull the resources away. No, I think most areas in the country actually tolerates a lot of nonsense, a lot of BS, a lot of tomfoolery. We don't have high expectations of politicians. We just don't. We don't have high expectations of the roads being properly maintained. We don't have high expectations of timely responses to issues that are effective. We don't have high expectations to long-term solutions that are well thought out that will solve the problem, relatively speaking, permanently, and not cause it to just be a band-aid that will then lead to a flare-up sometime in the not-too-distant future. Probably in the near term, it will just come back again. This is what we're accustomed to. So, on some level, at the very least, you have to ask, did we provide the bare minimum? At the very least, when we're shuffling resources around, did we take too many resources away from some areas because we took it for granted that it would be fine? Because the thing is, one could argue the PNM took it for granted that people will be fine with them doing similar types of things, except one could argue if you want to say you have a mandate to run the country, then you have to acknowledge that the mandate included, don't do that. Just whatever you do, don't repeat that. Literally, if you want to speak about the mandate that the election sends you, then there are clear indicators of what not to do. Now, one of the basic things with regards to the maxi taxis concerns are increasing the speed limit from 65 to 80, which conceptually speaking, I understand from a safety point of view, ironically. Now, maybe 80 is too fast. You do have to look into the situation properly. You can't just make a snap decision. I get that in this one case. But the thing is, driving at 65 on the highway at certain times, obviously when there's traffic and no one's going at 70, everyone is, maybe 50 or under, then it's a moot point. But there are certain times when, depending on the highways, if you're on the highways, driving at 65 is not necessarily going to be safe because of how people drive around you. And it's not everybody, but if you've driven on the highways, you kind of know what I mean. If you've driven on the highways and you don't want to drive at the speed limit, you know what I mean. Depending on how relatively clear it is, I would prefer not to drive at 90. I would at times sometimes prefer not to drive at 80, but I kind of have to drive at 80 at minimum. Otherwise, if I go any slower, I run the risk of crazy people that want to speed, doing all kind of maneuvers around me, and for whatever reason, they love to get really close. And the thing is, because of the angles also of how these near misses happen, I don't necessarily know if I want to see what happens when a maxi taxi gets put into that situation. Let's not forget the KISS delivery driver. It didn't really take that exotic of a hit to cause a major problem. Maxi taxis are not necessarily designed for stability. So one of the things is the fact that I'm actually kind of disappointed, and this is not so much at the current government, this is more with regards to the Ministry of Transport and their long-term considerations, right? Because this is where the public sector, yes, you're going to change from one political party to another, but the public servants, that's supposed to be where you have some amount of continuity, and I am disappointed that it seems as though this issue they're now going to look into it. And it probably should have been looked into once the speed limit technically went up to 100. Because vehicles driving too slowly, there's such a thing as driving too slowly and making it unsafe. I think if you're on the Autobahn, you will get a ticket at the very least. I'm not sure where else provides tickets for driving too slow, but if you're on the Autobahn, you're gonna get a ticket for driving too slow. Because the cars there are moving so fast, you are a hazard, you're a safety hazard, you're an obstacle if you drive too slow. Now, the thing is, if the political undertones are with regards to the PNM, is this how our politics is going to be? Or something goes wrong, we're going to blame the PNM? Like when the PNM did it, when they blamed the UNC for whatever went wrong, and we're talking year 8, year 9, it felt ridiculous. If the PSA has an issue with not getting their back pay, are we also going to blame the PNM? They wanted all in cash, right? Are we going to blame the PNM? The protesters for the Samaru shooting and the Sealy shooting, they want to blame the PNM. What else are we going to blame the PNM for, which technically has very little to do with the PNM? And listen, if the PNM are able to take advantage of a situation that you caused, that's a you problem. That's not a me problem. That's not anybody else's problem. That's a you problem. You left the police with a budgetary decision, which was technically ridiculous, defended by your Minister of Homeland Security, right? We've been told that apparently the party writes his speeches. Did the party tell him to say body armor over body cameras? Now, given his personality and how he has presented his presentation style, I wouldn't necessarily believe that to be true. But I have to ask the question based on what I've heard. Is it that that's the party's position? And is it because of their budgetary concerns? Because they made such a big deal about keeping their promises. Look at the promises that they kept in a budget that they didn't explain. So we have essentially a house of cards or, an aquarium of just hot air and smoke with regards to a budget, right? They didn't actually explain the budget. So we just have to take them for their word that promises were kept. Except when we look at one of the big promises that they made, It seems like they're fighting tooth and nail to delay that promise as much as possible, right? They don't want to pay the lump sum in cash. And arguably, one could argue, they were more than happy to not settle this before the election. They didn't want to commit to anything. But I find it interesting that you want to say, well, how would they know? They didn't know, right? They didn't know the economy was so bad. They didn't know they had so little money. I've heard people say this, right? To which I would generally say, how could they not know? All of the economists who were, many of whom were criticizing PNM, seemingly knew. I knew. I was criticizing PNM every time. I wasn't playing defense for the administration back when the PNM was still in power, right? How did we know? I didn't have access to any behind-the-scenes information. A lot of these economists, the PNM government's complaint was they don't know nothing. They don't have access to the information that we have. But yet somehow we all managed to come to the same conclusion. We have some revenue issues. How did the UNC not know? Was it that Dave Tanku took the lead on all of their economic prognostications? I mean, that technically would explain it, you know. That's an oversimplification, but technically it would, if that was true. So, you didn't know it was so bad. But you knew enough about WASA to guarantee we're going to throw out the PNM report and not replace it with anything. See, I have no problem with you disagreeing with the PNM. It's just that, as I said before, who believed WASA is healthy? Who believes WASA was in a good place? We knew enough about WASA, despite the fact that we don't know enough about the economy. We're taken by surprise here. We just thought the PNM was lying to everybody with regards to not having money, you know. That's why we said all of these wage negotiations were ethical. We didn't realize when we came into power, we also had to only offer 5% and look like idiots. We didn't realize that. We didn't realize that we had to keep the property tax money because as unethical as we said it was when they did it, we're not willing to give it back. No, no. This unethical money is ours. We're not giving it back. We need this money. You could take that unethical, now that we're in power, you could take that argument of it being unethical and just, you know, shove it. We don't want to listen to that now. Don't mind the fact that we made the argument. We don't want to listen to that now. You took your time with a lot of aspects of the government, but not with WASA. With WASA, you made quick decisions. Because you wanted to keep your political promises, except you couldn't necessarily follow through with the full implication of what you promised. And this is the thing, they implied a lot in the promises they made. And because it was implied, because it was suggested, and because they didn't have the strength of character to clarify exactly what they mean, to affirm exactly what they mean, because they didn't have the strength of character. They were more than happy to let you think, oh, listen, happy times are right around the corner, until they weren't. Until they became promises unkept. And right now, what I believe to be the case is the Minister of Finance is caught with his pants down, particularly when he said, oh, it could be 0% back. Wage increase for the PSA. The moment he said that, I knew that he's playing games with these people. He said that in a question with regards to the budget, after going on and on and on about promises made, promises kept, which sounds great. The slogan always sounds great. He contradicted his own slogan. He did. Now, I don't know if the PSA preempted the UNC with that 10% talk, and they just weren't willing to walk it back. But hey, you want to dance with the devil? That's the game you played. If you got outmaneuvered in a public setting, in your own political platform, that's a you problem. That's not a us problem. So, they have a situation where they're trying, I assume, to desperately not pay off the $3+ billion back pay in cash all at once. If they don't settle it, I assume there's always the open door of interest to increase the bill. They want it in non-cash payments. These are the things. You wanna do a handshake deal. You wanna have a non-verbal arrangement, and then you wanna start to negotiate terms after the fact. Was it worth it, Ms. Thomas? Because at the end of the day, she wore green, but the reality was she spoke as if she was wearing yellow. You can't unsee that. Her former boss, the one that made way for her to be president of the PSA, now sits in cabinet. You can't not wonder what arrangements were made. And when you have people operating like that, as the Maxi Taxi Association president said, they're creatures of politics. And on some level, you have to expect them to operate with politics. The thing is, one of our callers, he will, how do I describe this? He will want, when we use the word politics, to mean something along the lines of governing the country and things like that. But in TNT, I would argue, when we use the word politics to describe how politicians operate, that they are creatures of politics. We don't mean governance. We don't mean running a country. We don't mean operating within the framework of our legislative systems and bodies, etc., etc. We mean all of the nonsense and the bacchanal and the backroom scheming and wheeling and dealing and the unethical behavior and the quid pro quo and the kickbacks. That's what we mean. And I'm not necessarily saying that the Maxi Taxi Association is saying that the minister is corrupt. But he probably implied things that were distasteful. Because what has not been political from this administration? Granted, it's not as though the PNM in the past had a great track record of ethical behavior that was objectively fine. That airport in Tobago is one hell of a white elephant, to be honest. But things are so bad now that people at the margins are becoming more and more, not necessarily upset or enraged, but more and more backed into a corner, or feel as though they're backed into a corner. I think the president of the Nurses Association, he has a good one. Edie Stewart has called on Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar to return to an image of being the nation's mother, following her recent statement that accused trade union leaders of supporting protesters whom she claims are calling for gangs to attack local law enforcement. Now, I don't know if all the protesters claim that, but it's a very effective weapon to paint a group of people that might not be formally organized as a singular entity, unlike a political party, with a broad brush. Now, this could be because this is how political parties operate and they're projecting. They know they do BS. They assume everybody are BS artists as well. Because I will challenge all of the union leaders. There are 2 to 3, one is of a chapter, in government right now. Is this how we are fixing things? We had the Communication Workers Union basically all but say, Mr. Elder, you abandoned us. Where are you? Where are you? Is this how you are going to be part of the solution? Because I find it very strange that part of the solution that some former union lenders have, they're going to join something to fix the nation. And part of that solution is their leader accusing trade unions of backing protesters who are encouraging gangs to attack the government. Why is it everything about this government is about threats against them? You know, at some point we have to ask the question, is it really the gangs? What's the common denominator between 2011 and now? Because a lot of the gang members in 2011, probably not there now. A good chunk of the gang leaders from 2011, probably not there now. Now, if you want to say drug lords, that's a different conversation. But you're saying gangs. So what do we know for certain is the common denominator between 2011 and now? Who is the common denominator? Well, there are a couple, but the main one, of course, is the Prime Minister herself. What is it about her that inspires gangs to threaten her to the point where she feels legitimately threatened? Or is somehow anything that might be a threat, not physically, not violently, but politically, to her administration, she's going to translate that into illegal, violent, criminal threats against her government. It's almost like if she is a Chinese court minister or a member of the Chinese Politburo, and it all boils down to their one singular fear, a revolt of the peasants. They don't want the peasants to revolt. That would be bad. Because I ain't gonna lie, we don't even get the let them eat cake from this government. We got it from the last one. You know, oh, well, they could eat cake, you know, coal pots and bicycles. But from this government, it's yeah, we'll find the money. Your pocket. We ain't even gonna try to tell you, well, we're doing our best and here's some alternatives. You know, even if they don't seem practical enough. No. We're just going to outright take from you and then say, why you vex? We have a mandate. Literally, we have not gone for any extended period of time with the new administration where they didn't say, oh, there are threats against us. Well, at some point, I have to ask, what are you doing to have so many people threaten you to this extent? I mean, yes, there was a whole situation about figures calling for unification of gangs at protests and stuff like that. Right, fine, yes. But as was pointed out, do you think the gangs really going to unify because of a protest over police shootings? More of them die from rival gangs than from police at the end of the day. The amount of fatal police shootings during the time of the SUV is only like 14. Yes, the Express has it today. 20 police killings for the year so far, 14 occurring during the current state of emergency, which has only been 3 months. That's a lot, actually. But still, when we say gangsters killing gangsters, we try to just, you know, use that to excuse the 3 to 600 annual murder rate. 20 doesn't come close to touching that. Ironically, when we weren't under state of emergency, we had less murders. Go figure. Ain't that some... That's kind of ironic, actually. One of the lowest months of a murder rate we've had this year was the month where we weren't under state of emergency. That's performance, boy. Or is it just to tell us how much the state of emergency is, to some extent, a smokescreen? Yes, there's some effect. It has kept some of the gang leaders in line. They don't want to get PDO'd, according to one news report at least. But how long are you going to successfully run a country while your life is under threat? Is that why you haven't showed up to press conferences? You're afraid someone from the media is going to take a shot? Is media cameras and protest placards, do you see these things as threats against your life? Are media questions, you know, a clear and present danger to your ongoing existence? Are protester chants violent language to you? When they demand that you don't shoot? The imagery is interesting because this is the Prime Minister that basically said empty the matic. I guess that's what those police officers did, literally. One of them, to the point, he kept going, even after his matic couldn't shoot no more, whether it jammed or he ran out of bullets or whatever. He had to pull out the handgun and keep going. 19 bullets. No concern from leadership. More concerned about perceived threats against her administration. The thing is, the thing with the PSA and WASA, I don't know if you've kept up with the news, and a lot of people, because I don't always agree with everything Marvin Gonzalez says, but there's a certain amount of bias against him because he's former PNM. Now, his work as Minister of Public Utilities, I don't have a great issue with, right? I'm not saying that he performed the job perfectly and didn't make any faults, right? I'm not going over his history in that portfolio with a fine-tooth comb. But it all comes down to the fact that, did anyone think WASA was in a good place? And then the government, who for certain things needed to discover the reality, we didn't know that they didn't have that much money. But we knew exactly what was going on with WASA. We knew exactly what was going on. Everything is fine with WASA. We don't need to do nothing with WASA. Not one thing. We just need to give them the back pay. Oh, wait, we don't have the money for that. But how could we trust that you had more than enough knowledge with regards to what to do with WASA when, again, people would say, well, they didn't know, they didn't know, they didn't know. Because one of the things I didn't speak about last week was the stuff about WASA, about how in their rounds of hiring, it included social media influencers. I haven't necessarily gone through the story. And to be honest, I don't know to what degree I mean, were they former WASA employees that came back? Probably doubt. $416 people hired right after the general election. That's interesting, right? We know that the THA had a thing where they wanted to hire people under the THA to do their political party internet, social media work. It wasn't THA work. It was arguably their party's work. Is this one of those times? But more importantly, with regards to the whole situation with WASA, WASA ends up in the news every couple of months. They kick out the old CEO to put somebody who the current government was not, as far as I'm aware, able to refute Marvin Gonzalez's claims that he has no executive experience. Why is he now promoted all the way to the CEO? That being one of the names who the former CEO allegedly was having to report to, being forced to report to a junior. having a junior being placed above him informally, and then having said junior replace him. Only for that individual, said junior who replaced the qualified, internationally qualified CEO, as far as I'm aware, he has relevant qualifications for the position, the former, because the person that didn't have any executive leadership experience in WASA or any at all, who replaced the appointed CEO from the previous administration, who had previous experience in a similar role in a Caribbean state. Yeah, the hand-picked replacement, he didn't last, I don't even think he lasted half a year. He got removed. If my memory serves correct, he didn't leave, he got removed. All of this rigmarole to put him there, and then you had to remove him. And there were other things, I believe, I can't remember everything with WASA, but it comes out slowly over time. You hear stuff, right? Something is not right with that entity. And I imagine one of the agendas that the government has is to not allow anything to come out of WASA. Because then, on some level, and it's funny what politicians will want to try to cover up, even though similar things might be made public, and they'll do their best to ignore it or downplay it. So you kind of wonder, what is it? Do they not really know how to assess scenarios and situations properly? But I would imagine that they don't want anything to do with WASA to come out into the public eye. Any of the failures, any of the issues, because they met a situation, they said, oh, the current administration wanted to corruptly, according to them, change WASA. We'll get rid of their plans to do so and not replace it with any sort of plans or contingencies of our own. We're basically rubber stamping what's going on in WASA as is. So nothing better go wrong with WASA, right? Right? So now the question is, how long will the relationship between the PSA and the government last? At this point, I am considering, and I'm not saying that I'm going to be right, but I'm considering it's probably a matter of when, not if, the relationship is going to implode, given the fact that the government is having to do their creative math with the PSA and the back pay. I guess the thought was we want to keep the PSA happy, but now, at what point is PSA President Felicia Thomas going to say, you know, trying to ride this bull, it's beginning to get a little too dangerous now? Because what was the promising start of a political career, I'm going to put it that way, intentionally. It was a very political speech she gave, despite the fact that she's a union leader who, as far as I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong, is not supposed to be political, but she gave a very effective political speech. I was very impressed. I was both impressed and entertained. And when I say entertained, not that I found any fault. I literally found the speech genuinely entertaining while being effective. Pertinent, and nothing was out of place. And if you look at it for what it is and appreciate the craftsmanship, while potentially disagreeing with, you know, the how proper it was. Start a great political career. Now that career can be damaged by how this thing unfolds. At one point in time, does she want to hop off the bull? At one point in time, is the hot seat too hot? This association with a government that probably will try to paint her as some kind of PNM stooge or turncoat if she ever does anything to fall out with the current administration. That's their playbook. it's kind of overly simplistic, to be honest. It's either the PNM's fault or it's a threat against the government. It can't be that they don't know what they're doing. Oh, no. So, always keep WASA in the back of your mind. Always keep WASA in the back of your mind. We could complain about closing the refinery. That doesn't mean that WASA was in a great place. Petrochemical was probably not in a great place. Just the solutions were not the correct solutions. That doesn't mean that WASA didn't require some sort of consideration for change. Now, was the PNM's change going to be the best change? I don't know. But it seems as though the current administration, at least in part, figured out, well, we don't want to do these things, and we don't actually have a plan for WASA. So we're just going to let sleeping dogs lie. And as I said before, you do that, you leave the problem to hit us with consequences down the line. The question is, are those consequences in the not too distant future? In the near future, they could be consequences of their own making. But I don't like how these things are playing out. At the end of the day, why is it? Think about this now. With all that's going on, with all that is going on, why is it that the current administration is going to put themselves in a position where the Maxi Taxi Association could call them out for one of the most basic errors you can make? Because when they said, let me see if I could find it. When they said that ministry should work collectively through cabinet to address long-standing concerns affecting the sector. When that's one of the reports this morning, right, that's in the Express's report to be specific. It might seem like a simple thing to say. It might even seem like something, your expectations might be so low, you know, it doesn't seem out of place to you. But what is the implication of this statement? The implication of this statement is our politicians don't have their act together. Our politicians don't actually come together to deal with the concerns of the citizens. Our politicians are not functioning in a manner so that everybody could win. When UNC wins, that song potentially is going to go down infamously. It literally is a great, great political song. But depending on the legacy of this administration and the potential amount of issues that they are causing, it will potentially soon become a parody in and of itself if they are not careful. Because why is it that the Maxi Taxi Association is having to basically give you the most basic advice as though no one in car, and listen, I'm not saying that they're this bad. I'm saying they put themselves in a position to be talked down to as though they are such political children that they really don't know enough to be in the positions that they find themselves in. How does that happen? How does that happen? It's lazy politics, to be honest. And it's sad, because I don't necessarily think the PNM is that much better off. Once you get into government and your cabinet ministers, you're too busy with your agenda and your business and whatever that means for your bank account. So we get what we get. We get what we pay for. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get into some other stories of this. Stay tuned. This is Talking About NWS, and we'll be right back after this.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
In this day of stay at home and work from home, home has never meant more than it does today. Whether you're looking to buy, rent or build your new home, now is the time to get going. Gittins & Gittins real estate agents are here to take you to that place of your dreams. Let us take you home. We help you find that rental to rest along the way or journey with you to find your home destination. Investors and commercial enterprises too, call us and we'll walk the distance to place your business in just the right location. Owners, leave the headaches to us. We'll find your tenants or buyers while you stay at home. We'll even manage your property at your bidding. Anything real estate, come home to Gittins & Gittins Real Estate. Call us at 760-3280 or 747-1220 or visit us at 16 Fifth Street in Woodbrook.
Talk about the WSND Content Capital, and one of the things that we can't get away from, because I think the situation with Joshua Samaru and Kaya Seeley, that whole shooting, and now the aftermath, it's actually bigger than that one incident. Because part of the issue with our policing, our criminal justice system, our national security apparatus, has been the body camera debate, the debate of extrajudicial killings, or the perception of the police and other arms of the state potentially performing extrajudicial killings, right? Potentially performing unlawful shootings, not following proper procedure and the like. And then also, in general, how agents of the state treat members of the general public. This is not just police alone. And then there is wider minutiae within that, such as, similar to the nurses, to what extent the bad apples hold the good performers basically at hostage. In this case, we have a situation where, and I've said this before, but I'll reiterate it, a situation caused by, one, a lack of explanation as to why something that looks bad might not be, and I'm not saying this with the expectation that there's a good explanation, I'm saying that one was not offered, whether there was the ability to do so or not, I'm not debating that right now. I'm just saying one was not offered. But not just was a good explanation on what looked really bad not made available, but the communications of the people in charge implied certain things that were very distasteful and left the public in a situation where they were rather upset over a situation that has now reached a point where it might be causing practical issues for the case at hand. But it is Pandora's box has been opened, the genie is out of the bottle, the horse has bolted from the barn. You can't just close the lid and everything's going to be fine. You can't just ask people to roll back their emotions and everything is going to be fine. The thing is, again, it is not just about the incident and the people involved in the incident. It's not just about those 5 people, we assume it's only 5, 3 officers, Joshua Samaru Kayasili. It's not just about them. And a lot of the issues stems from, at least on the public side of it, after the fact, with regards to the responses or lack thereof from politicians. So, one of the things that I find, which is a continuation, it is, I don't know if it's a blatant continuation, but the government, I don't know what it is, because when the PNM did this, and maybe it's because they were doing it for so long, so we reached our limits eventually. I don't know if people were calling out the PNM for behavior like this from the beginning, but based on what I remember in the news, when they now came into power, they were a bit more diplomatic than this in the first year and a half, 2 years. I could be wrong, though. I could be very wrong. I know for a fact, obviously, that by year 6, year 7, this kind of stuff people were not tolerating from the PNM. I just think the issue is that we didn't expect it from a new administration. We're barely into year 2. We're 1 month into year 2. A level of defensiveness that we've seen out of Dr. Heath Rowley, but we didn't see in the first 6 months to a year out of Dr. Heath Rowley. A level of defensiveness that basically wants to disregard the concerns of the public, that wants to undermine, undersell, undercut, downplay the concerns of the public, that wants to basically say the public's concerns wants to imply that it's not legitimate. This is not too dissimilar to what the Maxi Taxi Association representative said, that the meeting with the Minister of Transport, Eliza Kerr, seemed to be more about what he thought the situation was, what he thought needed to be done, and for the people who actually live it, they were like, this person doesn't know what's going on some level at least. I'm paraphrasing. Because now Nia Blackman has come out. She said she avoids speaking on matters that do not directly concern her because, and this is very true, quote, it's very easy to be misunderstood, end quote. But felt compelled to break her silence. Quote, word of the day today is empathy. Empathy is a human emotion that allows one to feel and understand what someone else is going through from their perspective. What's going on right now with Kayasili is not right. Now, it's not necessarily claiming to be the most legally accurate claim in the world, but she's calling for empathy and express concern about Seeley's treatment. Again, she's paralyzed, right? She's paralyzed, and the father of her common law husband is concerned that she is being scapegoated, that she is being turned into a villain in order to try to potentially undermine her credibility so as to prop up the potential defense of others involved in this situation. The response to this, and let's not forget that an ASP and the TTPS, and there's a part of me that thinks, I hope he's not victimized because of this. What did he say with regards to the protesters? We empathize, we understand, right? Basically saying we get why the protesters want to protest. We understand the very human reaction and human emotions. We're not trying to police that. We're not trying to tell them they're wrong. We are trying to work with them so that we still do our job, so that we don't allow things that should not be done to happen, and to give them whatever leeway, whatever room to do whatever it is they feel they have to do, because we don't necessarily want to come down hard on people who have strong emotions on a situation that is very, very, very regretful and, you know, and warrants some degree of an emotional response, right? We just have to ensure that that response does not go out of control, is not irresponsible, does not harm anybody. That's what we have to do. So we respect them. We ask to some extent, well, maybe he didn't say this, right? But to some extent, the police is basically saying, just please, you know, respect us when we carry out our duties. We're not here to be an enemy. The government, however, they're not, again, this is coming from an ASP, not the executive. Can't speak for the DCPs, mainly speaking about the commissioner, because he fumbled the bed, he fumbled the rock months ago, right? Minister of Public Utilities Barry Patterath is urging public figures to become better informed before commenting on sensitive national issues. First of all, are you better informed? You haven't spoken about the issue until now. This is very convenient. It's almost like if how dare you soca artists speak out. You could almost hear the peasants at the end. Anyone who's in the public eye, particularly those who represent the state, has a greater degree of responsibility in treating with matters that touch and concern the national security of our country. What he's saying is, you're messing the money up. What he's also implying, let me not say that, you know, that's incendiary. Let me not say that. Let me not say that. But basically, who's the paymaster? And you could go from there. I stand with the Honorable Prime Minister in her public pronouncements on the matter. Sometimes persons speak from an uninformed position, acting on emotion without knowing the details and the law. I encourage persons in public life to become better informed and speak more responsibly. The DPP's office is independent and the government has the trust, faith and confidence in his ability to discharge his function without fear, favor, affection or ill will. That's nice. It's also tone deaf as hell. One, however, has never accused Minister Patterath of being a great musician, but it is extremely tone deaf. Because I have said it already. My arguments have nothing to do with Kayaseli's innocence or guilt. My argument is, this is why the public is enraged. It is your fault. You need to understand that and adjust accordingly. The public is not enraged because they're ignorant. The public is enraged because leadership said ignorant things that led them to speculate down a path to draw certain conclusions, whether right or wrong, because leadership said ignorant things. And Barry Patterath has said something that is far more ignorant than Nia Blackman. Because generally speaking, one could argue his entire career post-election has been one of displaying his sheer and utter ignorance. Which is sad, because at least, well, with regards to the former attorney generals under the past regime, at least with one of them, you could argue, look, he just didn't have the skills. He just didn't have the skills for the job. He lacked proficiency on a technical level. With regards to Reginald Moore, I mean, I don't know what to say, to be honest. That was a wonderful disaster if it wasn't such a serious situation, you know? If you literally turn that into a movie, it could be a comedy. You don't even need to change much of the dialogue for it to be a comedy, to be honest. However, Minister Padrat is not necessarily ignorant on the technical aspects. Oh, no, 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 no. Ironically, where his ignorance lies is in the politics. This is politically one of the most pathetic doubling downs I might have seen in quite some time. If you just take the Auditor General thing, if you take that out, then there's a stark difference between this and a lot of what the PNM did. Because one would think that politicians, at the very least, should have some degree of understanding of things like public perception, have some capacity to read the room. Now he's supporting his prime minister, but I don't think, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Yes, I understand it. Technically, they're right. They are technically right. The arguments are based on the fact this is the law, trust the DPP, blah, 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 blah. But the prime minister went on further, called the protesters grifters, right? And had a lot of other out-of-pocket things to say. And the thing about Ms. Blackman is, she's basically calling for understanding on the protesters. Now, maybe you want to disagree with the fact that she thinks Cassidy is being mistreated, but on some level, that's not an objective statement with a measurable point that you could say she's being mistreated by X amount of degrees, right? It's an open statement. And instead of trying to engage in the conversation, showing empathy, the minister is showing complete and utter ignorance of human emotions. Because how dare the peasants revolt? Again, similar to what the Maxi Taxi Association said with regards to the minister and the ministry seemingly does not really understand what our concerns are and potentially does not understand how to solve the problem, right? It's almost like if the ministry got a screwdriver, so everything has to be a screw. Even if it's a nail, we're going to put the extra effort to file in grooves to try to screw in the nail because we got a new expensive screw. This is an analogy I'm speculating on. But it's like, we're not going to do the solution to solve the problem. We're going to do the solution that either we like the best, that serves our purposes the best, not serves the purpose of the problem, serves our purposes best, whatever it may be, or is the easiest for us to implement so our budget doesn't go out of control because we can't actually find the money. You know, the prime minister doesn't want to go in front of the press because she doesn't want to admit that she can't actually find the money. But if that's the case, the Maxi Taxi Association representatives feel as though they are not fully aware of what the actual issues are. Dare I say, is it a stretch for me to then speculate on the fact that Cabinet does not actually understand the issue that is playing out in front of their very eyes? That's why I say their response is one of ignorance. And I say ignorant, you might think that it's a very strongly worded response, it's a harsh critique, but the fact of the matter is, I am giving them a minor out, which I did utilize when discussing the former administration. Never attribute to malice what can be attributed to ignorance, because the alternative is that it is intentional, that it is intentional malice. Because again, how dare you revolt, peasants? Marvin Gonzalez. And again, I understand people might not necessarily want to hear from someone from the PNM. But at the very least, a broken clock can be right twice a day. Marvin Gonzalez, Opposition Chief Whip, branded Prime Minister Kamal Prasad Bisesa a desperate hypocrite, quote unquote, accusing her of turning a blind eye to alleged wrongdoing within her own administration while condemning critics of the government over last week's controversial protest linked to Sealy. It is appalling, this is a quote, to all law-abiding citizens that the PNM, some union leaders, entertainers, publicity farmers, and political and race grifters are supporting protesters who are calling for the unification of violent criminal gangs to attack and kill law enforcement officers. From the Prime Minister. I guess I am what, a publicity farmer? I don't know. Entertainer. I'm a political and race grifter. I don't know. Am I? Why do they want to rename Piarco Airport again? Someone let me know. Let me know what the justification for doing that now is. But Gonzalez responded to that. The Prime Minister, this is Gonzalez's quote in response. The Prime Minister continues to live in an alternative reality that is trapped between her government's incompetence and her inability to contain rising murders and gang activities in Trinidad and Tobago. Her Minister of Defense was seen in videos and pictures with an alleged gang leader in East Trinidad, and her cabinet has persons on bail facing criminal charges. She is the upholder of wrongdoing in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as a desperate hypocrite. She rewarded the architects of life sport by her senatorial appointments, as well as appointed persons on criminal charges to key state boards like the NGC. Anna Ramlogan, this is a quote, is still on criminal charges and is the beneficiary of millions of dollars in state briefs via the Attorney General's office and state enterprises. Now, and then he continues, all these decisions reflect that the biggest and most profitable gang operating in Trinidad and Tobago is the UNC, end quote. Now, his statements are very political. I'm not going to say that I'm going to endorse 100% everything he said. It's political, right? I get it. This is where I point to the fact that I am speaking about politics, giving my opinions, not part of the political equation in terms of participating in elections, politicking, asking for votes, wanting to get kickbacks, none of that. Life would be easier. Unfortunately, I tend to rather suffer for the sake of my integrity, unlike many people who sit in a red building that is very fancy and has a lot of staff to serve them in various capacities. Not saying who, right? Not saying, definitely not saying Mr. Gonzalez is one of those. But he is a politician, it's going to be political. Even former Senator Jayanti Lakshmi-Dayal at times, and what I appreciated was the level of politicking from her was less, and she spent more time on the actual details of the matter at hand and not just a sort of political mishmash. And to some extent, there are pertinent details with what Marv Gonzalez has said. Of course, there's just political extras in there, and people are going to zone in on that and want to say, well, he's absolute rubbish and everything he says is wrong, when the reality is, within the political stuff that you might want to disagree with, there are some inconvenient truths at the end of the day. The Prime Minister, this is the thing, if you want to say everybody has skeletons in their closets and we need to treat each case on the basis of its merits, that's fine. And then you would have license to potentially speak about individual situations with the PNM as long as it doesn't directly contradict individual situations in the UNC. But you paint things in a broad brush. And when you do that, you should expect those standards to be used against you. It is what it is. What can I say? Now, let's not forget one of the biggest race grifts. And it is based in statistical realities. But still, I would argue, one of the biggest race grifts in recent times has been the debate about the demographics and crime. Just saying. Didn't bother with it then, right? Didn't bother about responsible commentary then. We didn't hear anything about that. All right. Granted, yes, the PNM utilized it to some extent on their political platform, but hey, I'll say I don't like none of it, to be honest. The Minister of National Defense has had questionable utterances, questionable political statements, questionable involvements. It is what it is. You haven't accounted for that. But more importantly, and I don't necessarily think the rising murder numbers, even though technically, yes, I think, where is it? We had something like, I think it was 12 murders, sorry, not 12, 7 murders in a 12-hour span recently. 6 people were killed following a violent night in South Trinidad in 3 separate incidents, and a man was also found dead in Mova. And this seemingly all might have been Sunday night. But I'm not necessarily going to say the rising murder rate is something that we need to pound the government with right now. I actually think the hypocrisy is the fact that, as EDCU had said, where's the mother of the nation? Where's everybody will win? Why is it seems as though when it's politically convenient, it is more expedient to blame wide sections of the population than answer their questions, than answer their concerns? Why is it that you don't have a reasonable defense? Listen, now, at the risk of bringing it back up, and it's not my intention, what did I say with regards to the situation around Senator General John Bates? I don't have anything against her. I will personally defend her and her character till I die over this issue. That said, there were legitimate questions with regards to why was the decision taking so long, and if you were going to try to defend her, then come out with a defense. If you had no defense, then on some level, you run the risk of making yourself and Senator Bates, John Bates, look bad because it seems as though you're hemming and hawing. You're trying to have your cake and eat it too. Now, I haven't seen if that situation has come to a resolution. I've been distracted with all of this. But the thing is, what was my word? Have a defense, make a defense. But there are a lot of things that this current administration seemingly is not prepared to speak about. Decisions of their own making. The defense with regards to the body camera situation is not sufficient enough. And they have not been able to go further to dispute the claims of those who take issue with the current situation with body cameras. And this Joshua Samaru Kaya Sealy shooting brought that back to the forefront. And just about any police shooting where you have any sort of reasonable doubt with regards to the action of the police will bring it back up to the forefront. But here's one of the worst things. Here's one of the worst things. Because one of my callers called in to say that a media ambassador said that they started the procurement process already on body cameras. And they have once again gone to the media to say that they have started the procurement process already with regards to body cameras. Except here's the problem. They started the process. Right? It implies that the process has been ongoing for some degree of time, except they've issued an expression of interest for the supply, delivery, and commissioning of body camera systems. That is to say, the process they started, they didn't even get bids yet. They're still in the initial stages. The deadline for submissions is July the 22nd. This is them starting the process apparently some time ago, because the caller called weeks ago to say that a media ambassador said they started the process some time ago. They now start, for all intents and purposes, for all practical purposes, they're still in the initial stages of this. Is your political budgetary promises in such a precarious position that you couldn't get $20 to $30 million or even $50 million? Let's go. I think 50 would be more than enough, because I think the $1 billion price tag had to do with other systems, right? Let's go 100 million even. Let's go 100 million, right? Let's way overcompensate the budgetary allocation to ensure that there's enough money for body cameras. For an issue like this, is your budget that weak that you can't find that money? This is the TTPS's statements, right? They fully support the use of body-worn cameras. They are not opposed to body-worn cameras, describing them as an essential tool for professional, transparent, and accountable policing. But according to the minister, they still weren't necessary. Right? The police service is saying it is moving with agency to procure and deploy body cameras, but stress that the implementation requires careful planning. Well, I'm sorry, but on some level, first of all, before you can plan, you need to get the tenders in. What was the careful planning with regards to the tenders now? Does it take that long to determine the requirements needed for the police service? I thought, I don't know, the police service has been policing all this time. You've already had pre-existing camera systems. You've already had this question, an issue since last year, if not before. Are you now looking into the matter to sort out the technical details? Why is it that we had such a budgetary shortfall that the minister had to make a case that he had to choose between body armor and body cameras? Here's the thing, in the Kaya Sealy Joshua Samra shooting, the body armor did nothing for the officers. No reports were granted that any of the officers were hit. You know what would have protected the officers in that situation, assuming they're innocent? You know what would have protected them more than body armor? Body cameras. Oh. We have a money line caller. Good morning, you're on here.
Hi.
Morning.
Morning.
Yes, go ahead, you're on here.
Morning, Sean.
Morning.
Yes. Now, I hear is about the body cameras. I doubt we get in that, because you know what? Is a set of corruption. We is not to know what's taking place and what's going on behind the scenes, We just had a guess and talk about it. It's just after that talking, they would never get that. They will never put it in place for me to see what is taking place, what's going on in the forefront. We haven't guessed that. It's a set of corrupted and corruption. What's going on? It have a well-known police station where all the drugs and things were placed. They placed it there to protect it. And next thing you know, they went back is a set of break-up board inside that. What inside there? All the drugs disappear. You see, it's a set of corruption, corrupted people all about. What's about that? I haven't heard anything about anything about that. You could fill me in. I'm not hearing about that. That is, we want to know about that, what went on there. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. We know that there were PDOs on officers that were involved in certain things. With regards to the municipal police situation, there were arrests made. The thing is, and this is the problem. This is the problem that the government and the police needs to understand. Because the media ambassadors will say, well, you don't know of all of the times police officers are charged and successfully prosecuted. And I understand that you don't always want to reveal everything, because at times it might be counterproductive. But the thing that the government and the police service and the criminal justice system needs to understand is there are far too many examples of where not saying enough causes your perception, trust and faith in your activities, and the public's cooperation to tank, to bottom out. So obviously, you cannot just tell the public, we can't tell you nothing. trust in, believe in us. It's not good enough. There has to be a point where practicality meets the legal obligations to ensure a fair trial. There has to be, because it's not working. And anyone that wants to pretend otherwise is ignorant. This is mainly with regards to the politicians who are more than happy to use, such excuses so that they don't have to talk. We have Shagonas on the line. Caller, good morning. You're on the air. Morning.
Go ahead.
You're on the air.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Morning.
Morning.
I was looking at something there. Right? This whole situation with the Joshua Samaru thing, had me doing some research and stuff. Sean, do you know that since Joshua Samaru, there's 14 more police involved killings? Right? And we didn't see in those cases there was no video evidence, but we didn't see any that arises reality from whether the police and so the public, how much of those 14 involved those same 3 police officers? We don't know that, and that is what happened the public comfortable. Because what we saw there is a deviation that cannot be standard policing procedure, right? And in our community, I was watching the footage again. Watch that video again, the extended video. After the shooting, after the shooting. Look at what happened. Some backup officers came on the scene after the shooting, right? Police officers, and that is why what prompted the other officers to shout, "Open your hand, don't move." When they know the people on them already immobilized, they could have been dead. They wasn't moving because they peep into the car, they see no action, they walk away from the vehicle, and that a little period there where nobody was around the vehicle after the shooting. The backup officers came, and when they shouted, "Open your hand, don't move," the backup officers watched the video. You know what they did? They took cover behind the vehicle. They took cover behind the vehicle. The police officers, the 3 officers went up, talked to them. It looked like it was preventing them from coming on the scene. They put the 2 bodies in the car. They drove off without even informing the other officers what take place. So when they drive off from the scene, the officers in them came in, they're on the scene with a vehicle, shut up, they know what's going on, and that will prompt them to be opening the vehicle and peeping inside and looking inside because they inside know what is going on. Right? So what I was raising now, if those police officers was my son or somebody's husband, my brother or somebody, I concerned. They just run up to the vehicle. They don't know what kind of firepower the vehicle had. If them fellas really had firepower, gun was real notorious people, we'd have had dead police officers on the ground. Right? We value police officers. Right? That process, somebody do me something, and then I want a confrontation, and then again this time I go to the police. Like the process, we need the police officers. But that happened there. That was disturbing. And they keep doubling down. You're going to all these lengths to protect 3 errant officers. And they keep escalating the thing. You get them try to come out to protest and stuff. You want to charge them and arrest them and all kind of thing. Right? That thing they can do. That ain't going to good. Right? Thanks a lot. I know other people want to call it.
Thank you, caller. From what I understand, the good officers tend to not be involved in shootings where large volumes of police ammunition are fired off, particularly when the balance of shots is so one-sided. Because it's not as though they could say Kaya Silly had an automatic weapon, Kaya Silly shot off. They say she had the gun, right? How many rounds did she shoot off? When did she start firing? When did she stop? Was she still firing even after, say, the first 15 bullets went? Right? Because they say something like 25 bullets they were hit 25 times. We don't know if it was only 25 bullets. So after the first 15 bullets were fired from the police officers, was someone in the car allegedly still looking to use the gun? I don't know. I've never been shot. I don't know how I would react. I would imagine 19 bullets to Joshua Samaru, 4 bullets in Kaya Sealy. It didn't take long before they had several bullets in them, particularly Mr. Samaru. So like I said, the good cops tend to not be involved in shootings quite like this. Not saying that they won't be involved in questionable shootings, but, and when I say tend, it doesn't mean that it can't happen. It doesn't mean that every shooting like this automatically we need to be suspicious about. It doesn't mean that we need to look at all situations and say there must be corruption. But the problem is, the Commissioner and the Minister of Homeland Security has successfully positioned the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to be viewed as an entity that cannot be trusted by the public based on how they have managed the public's expectations, based on how they have managed the public engagement, despite the best efforts of lower-ranked police officers, including the media ambassadors, the ASPs and acting ASPs, and to some degree even the DCPs. Because one of the things about you're now revealing to us situations that you would have revealed to us when things happened. You would have revealed to us that there was a gun when you have a police shooting. That's the first thing they reveal. Oh, we had a shooting. But they had a gun and they fired the gun. And then we're like, sure, they fired the gun. Sure, they had a gun. But the point is, once you present a gun, once there's a physical gun, it's still evidence that we have to account. It's harder to push back against. But you only now mentioned about the gun. You only now mentioned about the gun. So then, of course, people will speculate. And I will say that I have speculated, but I have not drawn a conclusion to the fact that is this a one squad, one song situation, where they had to get the story right, line up all the ducks in a row before they presented anything to the public and to the DPP. It's hard not to have those considerations given the fact that they have operated in a suspicious manner. When suspects do suspicious things, the police are warranted to suspect some wrongdoing, not so? You are not immune to that psychological consideration. You look suspicious. Commissioner, Minister, you look sus. It is what it is. Now the Prime Minister, she's more just doubling down on nonsense. Arima back, or is it on your Arima? Caller, good morning, you're on the air.
Yes, Sean coming back with the Samaru's the shooting. Care what now? When the 3 police was shooting up the man in the young man in the car there, all you realize one of them had a long gun, a tall long gun for shooting. And after a while, when all the bullets finished, he shoot so much. When the bullets finished in it, he took out a shotgun gun. I don't know the name of the guns and thing because I don't know about that. Mm-hmm. He took out a shotgun and he started to shoot again, which means that the long gun now, he load off all the bullets in the young man. You understand? All that went on. I lie down there and I say, yes, I have to call back. All that went on. So it's real criminals out there, boy.
Thank you, caller. I guess, are you ending there? Thank you, caller. Yeah, that's one of the things that it would have been good for the authorities to explain how that whole thing unfolded. One of the things that I don't know, I am assuming, I don't know for certain, but I am under the impression that the DPP is not allowed to talk. And I'm not saying it's his fault, right? He's not allowed to talk. The situation would be served, and situations like this would be served if the DPP on some level was allowed to speak. Of course now, the problem is you run into the well, then you have to be careful what you say, because if you say nonsense, you might get yourself in trouble and you get the axe. But the flip side is, I would argue that the job might require it. Right? Although in his case, because a lot of what I'm saying is stuff that the police have revealed before, after shooting, they did not reveal this time until after a file apparently went to the DPP. Now, in the DPP's case, I am under the impression he cannot speak, and I think that is part of the problem. This whole thing about it is better to err on the side of not saying anything. Why are the public not trusting us? Well, because you didn't say anything. Now, I'm not saying that now the public is looping in parts of the criminal justice system that have not yet engaged in this situation in any significant way. The DPP looked at the evidence provided to him and made an assessment, right? He did not gather the evidence. He is not part of the investigative team. I don't think he interviewed Ms. Seeley or anybody involved. Now, technically, we would have been served well if he was able to basically have a press conference to explain why these charges were approved or recommended, and to say whether or not the matter is otherwise closed or not. Because again, we don't know what's going to happen with the officers. We don't know what's going to happen with, if there's anybody else involved, what have you, right? So, if he could have given us some amount of explanation, it might have helped this situation from turning into what it has, although I doubt, given how it was mismanaged from January. We have a new Arima on the line. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Sean.
Morning, morning.
Yeah. I'm calling from Arima. Now, concerning our Prime Minister, I, as a senior citizen, have been following her for some years. She has been using some very, very disparaging remarks about people for years now. If I will go back, I go back in history. Since he did with Franklin Khan and Eric Williams, she was the candidate by there. She get Damsam Dansuk to lie. When he reached the court, he said anything. The teacup thing with Dr. Rowley, Julian Lucky told her, I will not lie on Rowley. Rowley never hit Chandra Sharma with no teacup in the room. Right? Julian Lucky refused to give false statement. And she gave up she post. Right? That is a woman integrity. Then you come back to the thing with this boy, Eric Williams, where they raise up charges against him. But the greatest of all injustice, Sean, and I personally, as a senior citizen, will hold all the columnists and this, what she did to Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley by labeling it vanilla topping to label his father. And Wade Mac and them put that in Hansard, that in the history of Trinidad and Tobago in the next 100 years, Sean.
Yes.
And that gives me, I lost all disrespect for that one. That Rowley's father raped him, and Rowley was a rapist. Sean, and nobody said to get that out of the records of this country. Not much proven. And she has been accusing people of all things. Right? They bring a woman Petia in Parliament. I have all in my brain here. I am 81 years old. You bring a Petia in Parliament. Jack one of them. With a woman say man and that woman child mother. You understand? When you say all these things and more, you come back with Rowley again with the senators and them and say people was coming to you to get money. And the columnists, the print media in color to say, well, look, show us, give us the evidence, you put on the parliament, you know. That in the history of our country, that ain't coming out. That two senators approach your point for favors, for money, so you are 9 independent senators saying down, boy, Sean, let me tell you something. I got my father taught me something. If he's my friend, he's my friend. If he's my enemy, enemy. You can't say things bad about me and come smiling after, Sean. I don't live my life so. You see deceitfulness? I hate deceitful people. And Sean, you see all this thing going on with the Joshua thing? It's so sad. I sit down and watch my TV. The car fall down, going down the canal, crash. The police jump out their vehicle and start shooting, bam, 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 bam. As the lady said just now, the next police, bushing gun, run out a bullet. He put out his cycle and start shooting again. And but they tell you, put their hands up, and the man hand up in the air. They could dance, they could do what they want. That everybody see, and that causes the problem now. Sean, I listen to you years now, so all the best.
Thank you, caller. Thank you, caller. Yeah, and that's the thing. People saw it, and no one offered a reasonable explanation as to why it's not bad. So what are they supposed to think? Because it looks bad, and to be honest, it is highly doubtful there is a great explanation for that video, right? But we don't know. We don't know. The video does not reveal everything, right? Technically speaking. I revert back, and again, this is what I said with regards to the PNM. It seemed as though every situation eventually turned into, well, let the courts handle it. Let the courts handle the general thing. Thank God for the courts. It seemed like everything had to go to the courts because we couldn't get a resolution without going to some part of the judicial legal process. And now we're in this situation where we're at this point already. We have to hope that the courts are able to sort it out. What does that mean? And yes, history will not look kindly on Prime Minister, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, I don't know if she was Prime Minister at the time, speaking about Dr. Rowley's family in the Hansard. They will not have the context of who she was. They will not have the living memory to provide that context. They will look at the basic facts and they will probably call it extremely distasteful, right? On that specific singular issue. We have Shagonas back, I think. Caller, good morning, you're here?
Yeah. Good on?
Yes, go on, caller. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Sean, I just called back before I lose my thoughts and so on. On the issue with this Senator John Bates matter, right? And I point out the hypocrisy that we in the Joshua Samaru case, and then they keep telling us to trust the process and trust the process and trust the system and so on. Right? But in the John Bates matter, and the process is that if they discover that any member of parliament, anybody guilty of some or integrity or whatever, it go to something called the Privileges Committee, because we don't know if they have a charge or what is the incident or something. And the Privileges Committee, when they say, listen, the person have a case to answer or they're guilty or whatever, then after they make the pronouncement now, either on both sides, either the government side or the opposition side, had to deal with the particular member after they go through the process and the Privileges Committee. They brought up this matter, and up to now, the Privileges Committee meet on the matter, right? And they want and the process, and they will never meet on this matter. You know why? Because the parliamentary session closed, right? And all the matters that were there, closed with that, and they keeping this thing in the public domain and pressuring the opposition leader to make a pronouncement, right? So the Privileges Committee come like the court, is there to meet on the matter and decide, listen, she have a charge to answer, she guilty, and we recommend she resignation, or we recommend this, or we recommend that, and if the opposition leader enact after that, then we could make like the process, that's all?
Something like that, yes.
Right? So in some cases, it's convenient to say trust the process, and in other cases, they leave it up to the court of public opinion and all kind of stuff and pressurizing people and stuff and things like that.
That's a good point.
That's unethical, in my opinion.
Yes, caller.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. No, well, the thing is, the John Bates matter on the side of the government is by my opinion and perceived by people who I spoke to, somewhat complex. But at the end of the day, your point, your conclusion, I think actually is quite valid. The thing is, she did not technically break any law. I'm not entirely sure exactly to what extent the Privilege Committee actually can formally do anything, right? I think actually she and Senator Awari were supposed to be before the Privilege Committee, right? The thing is with that situation is she was never the target. It was Senator Awari. She's a junior senator. She doesn't have a lot of political history, and she doesn't have the same level of political support and financial support, etc., etc. Awari is the target. To attack him would be a strategic, in the immediate term, would be very strategic for the government to do. And they were provided with an opportunity. They didn't create it, but they took advantage of it. For two reasons. One, if we could damage Awari, maybe get him out, great, right? Yes, I know a lot of people question his actual abilities as a politician, but with regards to the support he has, that is not insignificant. If we could also use this to attack the opposition leader, great. Although one could argue, if you think the opposition leader, Penelope Beckles, is not a good opposition leader, why would you want her to be replaced? That's an interesting strategic question. Senator John Bates in the immediate term offers no victory to get her removed. It's a minor one, you know. It's not like getting Imbert, you know. It's not a big established name. Now, I would argue that in the long run, it makes strategic sense to try to attack up-and-coming politicians who are capable. And I do believe that Janelle John Bates is a capable individual. However, yes, they went straight to the court of public opinion. Now what the defense is going to say is, well, this is a different type of situation where you are potentially muddying the waters of a criminal trial. You are potentially putting undue pressure and influence on people like the DPP. And I would argue, I thought the courts would also be a no protest zone, because protests that could affect judges, you definitely don't want that. You definitely do not want any accusation of undue influence on judges, right? If it's a bad judge, you want the judge removed. You don't want, protest actions affecting judges. And you might think, why not? Isn't it not worthy in this case? The problem is, if it's allowed in this case, then it might be allowed in other situations where the protests are done in bad faith. I think these protests are done in good faith. That doesn't guarantee that all protests from this point forward after this one is going to be in good faith. They could be in bad faith. So they're going to use that, but it betrays their ignorance on the situation. It betrays their ignorance with regards to what I believe is the reasons that got them in the hot seat that it got them. It's why the Minister of Homeland Security attempted to put forward, and maybe UNC people put him up to this. And if that's the case, because again, apparently they write the speeches, if he is following party directives, then perhaps we need to apologize. I need to apologize to the Minister of Homeland Security. I did say for certain PNM ministers, we do need to understand at least their cabinet did not operate where ministers made their own decisions on big decisions, right? Especially, obviously, budget allocations depends from the Minister of Finance, Ministry of Finance. So things like the education issues, you can put it all at the feet of Nyan Gatsby-Dolly. She doesn't control her allocation. Now, this is a little bit different. This is not based on budgetary allocation. The body cameras, yes, at least to some extent. But with regards to the response to this whole thing, the response to the video, and the thing is, if they don't understand that this is how it looks, then they are bad at their jobs. The response to the video of the Samaru killing, or what was said in the window that it will be construed as a response to that, was people should not be revealing CCTV footage of incidents to the general public. basically implying, don't do that. How can we cover it up if you do that? That's the implication that people are translating from the minister's calls of, well, we need to outlaw this travesty. How dare people see police shoot somebody with his hands up? They're not supposed to see that. That's the implication of what he said. And when you have things like that and you don't understand 2 + 2 = 4, 2 + 2 does not equal 5. When you don't understand simple public relations logic, you really are qualified to be a cabinet minister. And this is not directed at Roger Alexander. Minister Alexander is so new to this, and he comes from a much different background. This is rest of cabinet. And I would argue rest of cabinet probably is this inept. There are probably far more inept people in that cabinet than we would like to admit. There might even be more inept people in this cabinet than in Dr. Heath Rowley's cabinet. They just might. I know there are some spectacular examples from Dr. Heath Rowley's cabinet, but there might just be more inept people in this one. It kind of makes me have to look at the AG a little bit differently, because the Prime Minister said that the AG told her, what a great cabinet you have. And I didn't necessarily understand why he would say that then, and I really don't understand why he would say that now, because the collective results of this cabinet is less than impressive. It's less than impressive. At best, we're right back where, seemingly, the PNM left us off. But there is a potential for there to be a worst. We are worse off, just based on how they operate. And the sad part is, it's not even about the policy decisions, as I've been saying from the very beginning. It's how they communicate it. It's how they justify it. It's how they show transparency and accountability. That's the real problem. Now, with the PNM, there was a little bit more on the policy decision side where we had real issues with. But, hey, give them time. I already have an issue with the body camera stuff, to be honest. That one, I think, is indefensible. Indefensible. Tone deaf. Ignorant. Foolhardy. But, hey, it's not as though I've been saying that they've been doing the wrong thing since the very beginning. And look where we reached. Look where we reached. The situation with the TTPS somehow magically got worse. It got worse for them. Don't look at me and tell me that I don't have a clue. Because I don't want to see this from happening. I never wanted this. Everything I said was to try to prevent this in my small way. In what small platform that WSN has provided me, it was to try to sound the alarm bells, to hopefully help be a part of some effort to prevent things like this. But no, they know better. They know better. Look what you get. You get what you pay for. You get what you pay for. This is what we paid for. At the end of the day, I'll say this, who don't like it, do I like it? Dr. Heath Rowley, on some level, I think he was who he was. Good and bad. There was parts of him that was a statesman, and there were parts of him that we just didn't like. We just didn't like because he was a bully and disrespectful and all of those things, but he was who he was. I don't know about the current Prime Minister, because I feel as though she tries harder, at the very least, than Dr. Heath Rowley, to put forward a persona that when she says things that she said about the protesters, you get to see Mother Kamala is an act. Kamala 2.0 is a facade. It's really Kamala 0.1. The same old, same old. Now, I have no problem, madam, if you prove me wrong. I pray you prove me wrong. I want you to prove me wrong. Please do so. But you can't prove me wrong by doubling down on ignorance. You actually have to do work to be better than the people you claim to be better than. Because we don't just have one bull in a china shop. We have two. Thanks to the callers for calling in and voicing their opinions. It's always, oh wait, we do have a comment, let's get it. Thank you. Imagine using threat, duress, and coercion to establish joinder during a revenue collection exercise, then discharging a service weapon with gross negligence, no accountability, no charges for the cop. I'm not entirely sure. I'm saying what he says on joinder. I don't profess to be, perfectly well read. I don't know if he means justice, but it's a revenue collection exercise. I guess he's speaking to the fact that there was potentially a traffic stop, right? I don't know if the caller is aware or not, or the commenter is aware or not of the alleged gun sale and drug sale. They didn't say that they found drugs at the scene. So, but yes, this is the problem. If you are not going to charge the police, you can't just not charge the police and say, well, there was insufficient evidence. This is where, if this was a different jurisdiction, oh, you want to talk about democracy? You want to talk about the states? You want to be like the American president? If this was America, the various stakeholders at different levels, like the commissioner of police, like the minister, like various technical experts, well, by this point, would have given us a graphic and animation of the incident and explain what the officers did, what Kayasili did, what Joshua Samru did, why this decision was justified, what this decision means, etc., etc., to then say if they were charging the officers or not. We ain't going to get that because this is Trinidad and Tobago. We're not a real place. Thanks to the callers, thanks to the commenter. Folks, this is talking about a WSND contact of Apple. Sean Michael Small reminding you to stay safe, remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. I don't wish ill on the government. I am just pointing out observations of what they say, what they do. Apologies if you don't like it. Tell them to do better, please. Don't come to me. Don't forget, it's nice to be nice. This is me being nice. This is me being nice. Believe it or not. There's worse that can be said and will be said in rum shops and phone calls and house lines. Will be said. At the very least, be nice to each other because we can't necessarily expect parts of the government, not all, but parts of the government to be nice to us. We will see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN